Brooklyn Independent Television.
Hey, it's a big
But
vote.
will Brooklyn really go for
Why
it?
don't we just agree to disagree?
Yeah, that's really gonna fly in
Well, that's a
Brooklyn.
good question.
No. Listen.
That's exactly the point I wanted to make.
I regret to be the one to tell you this, but summer is officially over. You can tell because students are already back at school, the public pools are closed, and the last sequin from Brooklyn's biggest party, the West Indian American Carnival Day Parade, has already been swept from Eastern Parkway. And furthermore, I'm sitting here wearing a tweed tie with two of my favorite people to join us from last season. Steve Witt, the man behind the politics section at Our Times Press, senior editor there, and Carole Melhman, a board member from the New York City League of Women's Voters. And before we jump into things, I'm also going to stick in a little plug for Steve, who's sitting next to me. Along to his long list of accolades and titles, we're going to add author. He's the recent author of the soon-to-be available for purchase, The Street Singer. But we'll talk about that a little bit later and much more in depth on Brooklyn Review. So be looking out for that in the future. But back to the politics at hand. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Brian.
Now, Vito Lopez is on his way out as the chief of Kings County Democrats.
I consider him the boss.
The boss.
He's the boss.
Right.
And a lot of people are celebrating.
A lot of people are celebrating, but for a long time, Vito Lopez was the man and had a very firm grasp and grip on Democratic politics here in Brooklyn, which some might say are the only politics here in Brooklyn. We'll get to that later. But there had been some chinks in his armor, though. We saw Diana Reyna, who was a former staffer who was then left and won some contests that Vito had put people up against her, as well as there was a long sort of disconnect between him and Nydia Velázquez, who also was successful after her primary challenge that we talked about last time. So had this been like the writing on the wall, guys?
What's ironic about the fall of Vito, if you may, is it wasn't political corruption, which normally is what gets him.
Which he's still under investigation for.
I think he'll get out of the political corruption. I mean, even Mayor Bloomberg gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to his nonprofit, the Bushwick Ridgewood Senior Citizen Center.
Right.
And I think he's a typical Brooklyn boss. If you go back, Clarence Norman before him was indicted for corruption.
Right.
Before him, I think, was Howard Golden, who was the
former BP.
Right. And before him was Meade Esposito, who was
You've gone way past my memory there. So before Golden, even.
Right. So I think that whoever the next person's going to be is going to wield a lot of power.
So he's been, Carole, 14 terms is in the state assembly? Vito Lopez, is it 14 or 16? 14 terms in the assembly, and he's been the boss since '06.
He'll get out of the political corruption. I mean, even Mayor Bloomberg gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to his nonprofit, the Bushwick Ridgewood Senior Citizen Center.
Right.
And I think he's a typical Brooklyn boss. If you go back, Clarence Norman before him was indicted for corruption.
Right.
Before him, I think, was Howard Golden, who was the
former BP.
Right. And before him was Meade Esposito, who was
You've gone way past my memory there. So before Golden, even.
Right. So I think that whoever the next person's going to be is going to wield a lot of power.
So he's been, Carole, 14 terms is in the state assembly? Vito Lopez, is it 14 or 16? 14 terms in the assembly, and he's been the boss since '06, and it's almost continuing a tradition of corruption that you spoke about before.
I really question, although he says he's going to keep his seat, whether he really will, whether enough pressure is going to be put on him that he will eventually resign. He is, 71?
And had some health problems.
And he's lost a lot of the power that really made him happy there.
Right.
So I mean, that's my gut feeling about this, that he's not going to stay.
I think for viewers, it might be important to define what a county chair does in the Democratic Party, and just to set parameters.
Put us in that boat, Steve.
Well, one, Kings County has the second highest amount of registered Democrats in the nation after Cook County, I believe.
Right, for a place that's not its own city proper. Like
right.
Chicago is number 1 and we're number 2 here.
So as a result of that, the chair of the Democratic Party wields a lot of influence because anybody they pick to run pretty much is guaranteed of a win because it's a one-party county.
Right.
As a result, what the county boss gets to do is he has a big sway over attorneys that run for civil and Supreme Court judges.
Right.
He has a big sway over patronage jobs. There's all kinds of political aides, kids of politicians, friends that need jobs, you know, as aides. He helps with that. And lastly, the county leader is very strong in steering contracts. A lot of viewers might think that the real way to make money is for profits in New York City, but nonprofits do really well. They provide a lot of services, and favored nonprofits get a lot of contracts, government contracts.
Right.
So the person that gets to head the party gets to do a lot of this steering of, you know, the back room. The back room wheeling and dealing. So for a viewer that just votes for an election, they might think, well, I have nothing to do with who's the new county chair.
It's not an elected position. It's not something that a voter, you or I, could walk into a ballot space and pick Vito or any other person to be our county person.
Well, and then just to take it further, I don't mean to hog this conversation, is the way Democratic politics has worked in Brooklyn is every neighborhood and assembly district pretty much has a club. You might have heard the term clubhouse politicians.
Right.
And each club picks a district leader, a male and a female in each district, and they get together and they vote and they pick an overall leader. The big boss.
So you've put us in the district leader. You've made a segue, although there's still a lot of stuff happening with Vito Lopez, including his predecessor, not past predecessor. We're going to talk about his successor. Who's going to be next? I've heard 3 names. We've heard Kareem Kamara, maybe in order of the longest shot. So we'll start with Kareem Kamara, another assembly person, followed by Joanne Simon, and then the guy at the top of the list seems to be former judge Frank Sedio, current attorney, former judge,
surrogate
also
judge.
One of those surrogate judge, and also one of those male district leaders.
And the head of the Thomas Jefferson Democratic Club in
the toughest,
Canarsie.
oldest, most powerful,
very old
some would
school.
say, Democratic Club in Brooklyn. So who has it, Carole?
I really don't know, but I do know there are a lot of clubs that have become more active. Some of the younger, new residents maybe in Brooklyn. Prospect Heights has the Democrats for Reform, Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats. So we're going to see if they're going to be able to get enough influence to change the way it's always been. That's not, you know, that's maybe unlikely, but possible.
Well, it's a start. So does Sedio have the job?
If I was a handicapper, I would say that Sedio is a clear front runner. He in South Brooklyn, he has tremendous support. I think that one thing that I would look interestingly if I was going to predict, and I had a crystal ball, I would say that Canarsie used to be an Italian Jewish neighborhood, and it's increasingly a neighborhood of color. As a matter of fact, you know, you hear about gentrification, Fort Greene and Clinton Hill, but
where are they moving?
Where are they moving? They're moving to Canarsie and Flatlands and Brownsville and East New York. And Bed-Stuy, even though it's getting more gentrified, I can't see it going the way of Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, because it's still
very staid, and most people own their homes.
Right. And there's a lot of NYCHA developments there and Section 8 based housing there. And I don't see gentrification really pushing those people out. But that being said, Sedio comes, he's an Italian guy, and Lou Fidler's the current city councilman. And he's
about to be term limited.
He's about to be term limited. And there's a Haitian American, Mercedes Narcisse, who wants to be the city councilman in a neighborhood now.
City council person.
City council person, city councilwoman, in a neighborhood that's moved from Italian Jewish to being largely Caribbean and African American.
She happens to be a woman of Haitian descent.
And her eldest child's godfather is Frank Sedio.
Surprise, surprise. And they're friends.
They're friends, but I could see a scenario where he cuts a deal with Mercedes, allows her to run. He becomes the Kings County Democratic chair. By allowing her to run, he'll forge a better coalition with the Caribbean Americans, the black community, and then he'll run for borough president.
Really?
I have a funny feeling.
I like this. You went out on the ledge.
It's a very funny feeling I have about this.
It's like setting up dominoes, because let's go back a few months to the Sturabin Fiddler race, which was changing things anyway, because Lou Fiddler's going to be out, Mercedes versus Sedio for that city council position. He's the he's the godfather of our eldest daughter, and the Observer, their politicker, had a great headline that was frenemies, where they talked about the two of them and their relationship together. But Sturabin won that election for a seat that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And now there's still going to be space, because now Sedio might not have to be in the city council if he gets to be the boss.
In general, I mean, term limits causes a lot of this shifting and movement from district
delayed
to
it by
district,
1 year with the mayor.
Well, let's hope Mayor Bloomberg doesn't decide for a fourth term.
Post to post. But to change the conversation a little bit, I think it's important for the voters. This primary is kind of obscure, this September. First of all, it's a Thursday.
Yeah.
And normally it's a Tuesday, but the Tuesday was September 11th.
Right.
So they made it Thursday, September 13th. We've had primary after primary after primary.
Right.
In addition to that, you have these change districts.
Right.
And change polling places, and people really don't know.
I know that's a big initiative of the League of Women Voters.
And that's where the League of Women Voters of New York City, LWVNYC.org, has a lot of information for voters that could be really useful, where they could check out. There's a polling site locator. The Board of Elections has one too. They put in the address. There's another thing going on, along with a lot of other voter suppression that's going on around the nation, is this intent to cancel. Notice that people are getting, that's questioning their voter registration.
Right.
But it's a good idea for everybody to go on the League of Women Voters website or the Board of Elections website and check their registration.
So, I'm sorry, continue.
Because of this intent to cancel. So you want to be sure that you're still registered.
Right.
For the primary and for the general election, which is where most people are going to really want to show up.
So speaking of that election that's coming up, and one of the very tight races and most interesting races in a otherwise maybe mediocre primary season is the vote for district leaders. And I know that you have written a lot about this subject, and it's of particular interest to me because two of the tightest races are happening in North Brooklyn and Williamsburg, where I just left Williamsburg and I moved into Bed-Stuy. I'm in the 11206 now. So I'm just following where the hotness is. There's a contested race in Williamsburg, but there's one in Bed-Stuy as well. So since it's my new home, I'm gonna say let's start with Bed-Stuy.
Well, I think Bed-Stuy, I would handicap that Robert Cornegy is way ahead so far as, I don't know whether he's a better, he's the current district leader, and he's running against Al Wiltshire, who's a longtime Bed-Stuy guy, nice guy.
Who worked for
Ed Towns, he's chief of staff. I would predict Robert Cornegy is going to walk away with this. He also comes from the VITA, which is the Vanguard Independent Democratic Club, which kind of controls Bed-Stuy. It was started by Al Van. Former assemblyman, now city councilman, and Robert Cornegy is the president of the VITA Club.
And 28-year-old Lincoln Resler is up against another longtime North Brooklyn, actually the chair of Community Board 1.
Right.
and they are fighting it out for the male district leader position there in Williamsburg.
I like Lincoln Ressler. He seems to be able to raise a lot of money. He's going to spend $100,000 to keep
endorsements. He had Marty out there with him.
Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats endorsed him.
He's able to raise money. I think he's really good. On the other side of that, and I forgot the gentleman's name.
He is
I can't pronounce
Chris
it.
Olachowski.
Olachowski.
You're a Chicago guy.
I know. Well, you know, it's interesting coming from Chicago and understanding the machine politics. This is one where I kind of like that Vito picked him. I mean, it's Greenpoint. They've never had a Polish-American district leader. Right. And even though I understand Lincoln Ressler, he's a reformer. He seems very competent. He's young. He's new blood. The other side is, you know, having a Polish-American in Greenpoint.
It makes sense. And Olachowski is a known quantity. He's not someone, Johnny-come-lately. He's been around and doing a lot of constituent peer-to-peer work in Brooklyn and in his capacity as CB1 chair. So he's not a carpetbagger. Like, he's a guy who's been around for an arc, and a lot of his campaigning has been centered around that and the way that people feel about their changing neighborhood and the gentrification that's happening, and sort of trying to blend those two worlds that are happening in North Brooklyn.
In this particular, I mean, in most primaries, but in this, and maybe all elections, but in this one particularly, with the odd date and all that, I think who turns out the vote is going to be the determining factor.
Yeah,
I think voters will win if either one wins on this one. I think Ressler will bring much needed fresh blood and new ideas, and he's got the party behind him. But I think Olachowski, right? However, Olachowski.
Yeah.
I think if he wins, the Polish Americans deserve a voice. I don't think he'd be bad. He knows the community. So I think this is one where the voters are going to win either way.
So speaking of voters winning, Republicans are coming. You know, Brooklyn's a longtime Democratic mainstay, but the Republican Party has been making great strides in Brooklyn and Staten Island and increasing that power base. And as further proof, we talked about Sturban beating 3-time City Councilman Fiddler. And they just kicked off their push for this election cycle. We, at our Brooklyn Review show, were just out there at the headquarters, and Chairman Eaton of the Craig Eaton is excited and saying, we're going to do this. We're making inroads. So how is Brooklyn's Democratic credentials, you spoke about as having all those registered Dems, you think we're in danger? Is Brooklyn going the way of the Republicans now, Carole?
Well, it's not going the way, but there are parts of Brooklyn that are, and I look at it and I'm thinking of it as the more suburban parts of Brooklyn. And I think part of it, I mean, there are a lot of factors involved in this. One of them is, I think, their fear of the increasing density and apartments and condos coming in and knocking down some of these older private homes in some of these areas.
Yeah.
I think there's the Russian influence.
Call them enclaves.
Right,
you talk about the Republican, I cannot think of enclaves. They have lawns there.
Some of the Russian influence. There's the small business. This push. The Republican trying to bring the small business person, making them feel like they really
did build it.
Right.
Yeah.
First of all, one of the reasons why Republicans are gaining, I was speaking to Alec Brooke-Krasny. He's a Russian-American assembly member. He was saying, Steve, with his accent, I can't do it right. He was like, Steve, most of my constituents are Democrats, but they vote Republican. And it kind of reminds me of, like, in the Latino vote, the Cubans that came from Florida under Castro are very Republican-leaning.
Right.
Whereas the rest of the Latinos, Hispanics, pretty much lean Democratic. I think it's the same thing with the Russians. They come from a country where they weren't allowed to own their own businesses as much. The opportunity wasn't there, and they came here. They have very Republican conservative values. Right. And even though they might be registered Democrat,
a lot of their identification is with that.
And they'll flip when they vote. Yeah. And I think they're the leading cause, like in Brighton Beach and Sheepshead Bay, Manhattan Beach. I wouldn't call it suburban. You know, I think that that's a misnomer. Is Bay Ridge a suburb? No, it's basically Irish and Italian cops and Palestinians and Lebanese. But
I see some of the areas though that where they're voting Republican are the older private row house.
Yeah, very settled
type,
and old neighborhoods.
Neighborhoods also. So that's why I say I think there are many streams going into this river that coalesce. You have the Orthodox Jewish community also. And it's different pockets. Now the question is where the districts lines are, and you know where these groups would have a majority, because it's different little pockets.
So speaking of the districts, we're just at the end of a process where the city council we're at the end of the beginning, where the city council is going to be redistricting city council lines for all of our elected representatives on this level. We're sending our city council people in, and that's 5 different meetings, 1 in each borough, where the process is explained, and there's a sort of primer leading up to how these districts, the process behind it. So that's the first step toward transparency, but how are you guys seeing this process shake out? It's always a fight when we have to change the lines in the city.
My feeling is that when they change it on a federal level, it's a little bit easier because they could do population shifts. I think in the city, they'll have to do the population shifts from area codes, I guess. And I think the big one is if Lincoln Rustler wins against Stephen Levin in North Brooklyn right there. If they move those lines a little bit, it could go in Diana Reina's or DeLon's.
Yeah, it's like one of these, and this is my former neighbor. I live right there. I always was fond of calling it like a Star Wars outpost bar. There's a very staid, settled Puerto Rican community in like Las Dulces over South Williamsburg, right, that abuts the Hasidic neighborhoods. That is right next to like Marcy, where it's more, there's a stronger African American presence, and then the North Brooklyn, a lot of new young wave hipsters coming in, as well as a little bit further north, and you get to the staid Polish community that's in Greenpoint. And there's a few points where all of those neighborhoods sort of meet each other.
I think that's going to be, for Brooklyn purposes, that's where the battleground's going to be over redistricting.
And then we're talking about the Asian community has made huge leaps and bounds in Sunset Park, and those people need their own district.
They want their own
rallying cry.
They want their own district.
And they're deservingly.
You know, and so the pressure is always on, and the question is most of these groups don't really have enough in one area to have their own districts, so they have to have coalitions or, you know, share a person, a council member. So it's very difficult in a as diverse an area as Brooklyn. Before our interview ends, I wanted to just alert people to the fact that if they want absentee ballots for the September 13th primary, they'll have to get their applications in ASAP. I mean, they say the last date is September 8th, but that's a Saturday. I don't see how that's, I mean, the Board of Elections claims they're going to make this work. I would say get that request in ASAP, and it has to be in the day, be mailed and postmarked the day before. And then they have to make sure they're registered for the presidential, because you have your 30 days, and then the absentee ballots have to be in.
So Carole, you got us in the presidential stream. Like we have to, like it's still MSN. I was watching the other day.
It's only how many weeks away.
They already started their countdown clock. I was watching the Sunday shows, and it was something like 78 days until the election. So it's like Christmas is coming. It's one of those things now. And we've heard a lot has been made of this. We're sitting here, I'm giving away a little that it's still Republican National Convention time. We're taping this on Thursday or Monday. I just let it slip. But Mitt Romney is speaking tonight, and statistically right now has 0% of the votes of people of color, mainly black people in America, was what it came down to. So Obama country, Brooklyn, is that 0% number going to maintain here in Brooklyn?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I see maybe Condoleezza Rice. What's her percent?
Well, she's not. It's still statistically speaking, so it's not necessarily.
Yeah, maybe 1% or something.
Yeah, we had a great interview with the man behind the Tea Party in Brooklyn, who happens to be a black Republican. Maybe we'll have him back on. Maybe he's just a tea bagger right now. I don't know what the classification is, but I'm putting the invite out there so we can talk about it some more. But 2 minutes to go. Carole, please share information about contact for the League of Women Voters and a key date for getting registered.
They're important things. lwvnyc.org. We have a lot of information. We will have the candidate list a week before the election. We have a national website, 411.org, to get information nationally. Of course, you have your Board of Elections website. We have a poll site locator so that you can find out where you vote, because some of those have changed. You can check your voter registration, make sure you're still registered. All of those things are available to you, and they're easy to find on our lwvnyc.org. So take advantage of that. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, and it's important to have that information because people wake up the last minute and realize that they want to vote for one of these candidates.
And they'll send your ballot right back. Don't let time catch you out there. And Steve is too embarrassed, or he's very gentle. So I'll say his book, The Street Singer, should be out very soon. So be looking for that. And we'll see you next time on Intersect. Thanks for watching. Bye now.
Bye.
Watch this and other Brooklyn Independent Television episodes online at bricartsmedia.org/BIT.